Hello everyone. Thank you for being here. As you can tell by the title of this video, this is the last episode of the Astrology channel's horoscope series, hosted by me. Once hosted by me and Kyle, but now it's time for a bit of a switcheroo. So what's going to be happening moving forward, before I get into the why, is that Kyle is going to come back into the channel. He's going to come back doing these horoscopes and everything for you guys. So you get to still have your little weekly horoscope moment every week. But I will no longer be in the channel at all. I actually will no longer be pursuing astrology in the same capacity anymore. Even if you watch my horoscopes through my website, themercuryrising.com, you're also going to notice that I sent a newsletter today giving a notice that I will no longer also be taking readings for the foreseeable future. The why of that is because this has been going on for a long time, but I really had to come to terms with what being an astrologer means to me. Very early in my career, I always had a bit of a qualm with astrology readings and doing astrology readings, and I always saw it as a stepping stone to one day being able to just either teach astrology or write about astrology or create content that's not just about astrology, but philosophy and all those other things as well. But in doing that, I realized that what I'm doing in the present isn't necessarily facilitating my future goal. And so that's why I'm having to pull myself out seemingly from astrology, to come back in a different sort of way. And so it's actually very interesting that this is my last episode, because this whole entire week's transits are actually very tied to my nativity. And even in editing it, I recorded this like months ago. Even in editing it right now, I'm like, oh my God, it's so ironic. And so I know that I'm posting this a little bit late. Usually these videos go on Saturday, but as you can probably tell, one of the reasons why I'm also leaving is because of time. And yeah, so I invite you to both watch this horoscope as like your horoscope for the week, but also as my a personal sort of like self-portrait of my journey, I guess, in these horoscopes. I've been doing these for almost 2 years. It's been quite the artistic experiment, I think, and I'm excited to do more things like that. And that might mean that I have to pull some of the astrology out of it a little bit, but not all the way. It's never gonna go away. I'm never gonna stop being an astrologer. I'm just stopping doing readings. But yeah, I hope that you guys will enjoy Kyle's presence here and what new things he has to offer. But until then, you can still stay in touch with me at themercuryrising.com. I'm not going to take down my website. My website is just going to be changing a little bit. Some of the services that I provide will be more focused on my role as a producer, because if you don't know, I produce the Astrology channel, but I also produce many other astrologer channels out there on YouTube, and I want to continue pursuing that as a cornerstone of my astrology career, I think. And yeah, so if you're an astrologer and you're curious about that, you need a producer or need any sort of thing, you should go to my website, because there will be more about that coming up soon. If you're not, you still can keep up with me, because I'll still be writing articles, I'll still be doing things, it'll just be a lot slower and a little bit different. I think that part of this is also a move to really stick to my astrology philosophy, because I really have one of the reasons why I have a lot of reservations around giving astrology readings is that I think that, one, you really do need to have some psychological training to be able to do that in an efficient and client-centered way. And the other piece of that too is that I think that an astrology reading is always best when it's done by the person who owns the chart. Like, no one This has always been my philosophy. No one can read your chart better than you can, and I think that I'll really be shifting my practice to cater to that, to maybe teaching you how to read your chart or how to teach you how to think about these crazy philosophical ideas. But I need some time with that because I'm about to head into a Saturn return very soon, and I'm hoping that I'll figure that out for myself before I can teach you how to do it. But all right, with that, this is goodbye, and I hope that you enjoyed all these horoscopes. I hope that you enjoyed hanging out with me, and yes, I will see you someday. All right. Bye-bye. All right. Welcome to the Astrology channel. Let's look at what's happening this week. We have a bit of a continuing story that Mars trying to Venus and Saturn continues to build this week. We also have Mercury and Venus stationing direct, adding to that story a little bit more. And then concluding a long eclipse window, it felt like forever, is our first non-eclipse full moon in Libra. But with that, let's take a look at Monday. Monday is the moon's day. This is April 7th, with the moon waxing in Leo, Peregrine in Jupiter's decan and Saturn's terms, soon being received by Jupiter through a sextile and the sun through a trine. So yesterday I talked about this Jupiter-Sun sextile and how excited I was about it. Now, I guess even a little more exciting, because like I've been talking about forever now, every time the moon comes to Leo, she's feeling pretty good because she's away from Saturn, she's away from Mars, she can only see the good things in life. This was a little bit more true when Venus was also in Aries, but now that Venus in Pisces, it's a little bit less so. But we get a bit of a different flavor of this sort of fortunate moon in Leo. And the reason why that is because the moon is in Jupiter's decan, but also the sun's sign, as she's forming a sextile to Jupiter and a trine to the sun, which is a pretty big deal. And essentially what this means is that the moon is getting a lot of reception. Before, the moon in Leo was seeing good things and seeing the potential in what could be, but then now the moon is actually handed resources and concrete things to work with, which is really nice from both the sun and Jupiter. And whenever we think about the sun and Jupiter together, what I always think is success. It's notoriety, is being known and seen and loved by everybody, and also being able to give back and to be generous. This is why in the image for today, I just had Lady Moon just rejoicing and rising victorious after this eclipse season sort of ended. I think that in many ways this is when we really get to feel that. One of the good things about today might be an ease in looking good and accruing sponsors and helpful people who are gonna back you up. I think that just by looking at this moon and Leo image, you really get the sense that this lady is victorious, she's triumphant, but there's also a whole bunch of people in the background kind of like really cheering her on. So I think today could be a day where you get cheered on, or you're doing some of the cheering. But either way, celebration is afoot. And it is for those reasons that I gave today a 1 difficulty and a 3.5 utility. I think the difficulty of today is that the moon is somewhat peregrine. It's that the moon really needs a lot of resources from other people to be able to do well. And so this could be a day where we're really in that Leo space where we're really concerned about how others perceive us and things like that. But the utility of today is that others are likely to perceive us pretty well. And so I think that there's not much of a worry there about those things. And if anything, there's a lot of room for, I don't know, celebration, maybe? I hope so. And some of the signs that maybe should be celebrating today are Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Moving on to our Tuesday, which very much looks like a moving on sort of day, is Mars's day, April 8th, with Mars in Cancer, still slow, fallen in his own element, the moon's decan and Saturn's terms, mutually receiving Venus and Saturn through a trine, while also trine to Mercury. So I've been talking about Mars and this whole situation in Pisces for some time now. Even though Mars is really being overcome by everybody in Pisces, I feel like Mars is really still sort of taking the lead. Maybe it's that Saturn, Venus, and Mercury are all imposing these needs on Mars, but Mars is the one really kind of doing the rough work and getting everybody to move along. Mars just rowing along in a boat with Saturn, Venus, Mercury, and everybody just let's get the fuck out of these water signs sort of vibe. And it's very similar to what we've been talking about last week. I think that now everybody's just getting together and getting ready to move. We have unfortunately not yet moved to the fire signs, but despite everything, I think that the wind is on our sail, so to speak. And it's for those reasons that I gave today an even score of 2.5 difficulty and 2.5 utility. The difficulty, you already know what I'm gonna say, is that we've been dealing with this for a long time, but I think that the utility is that we're over eager to leave and move on for those reasons. There's no indecision, there's no lack of certainty anymore. We very much know what is the target, so to speak, and so we're gonna go and get it. We talked about that with Venus mostly, but I think that Mars right now is really beginning to get some of those fires pumping, you know? But some of the signs that should start to feel that today are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. The whole entire zodiac, basically. Moving on to our Wednesday, not as speedy and a little bit of a bummer, is Mercury's Day, April 9th, with Mercury stationed in Pisces, out of sect and element, Mars' decan in terms, conjunct Saturn, and received by Mars through a trine. All right, so one of the things that we've been talking about with planets kind of getting close to the Saturn-Mars situation is that depending on where they're situated, you can get some pretty good aspects between those. And this is what we have right now. It's like Mercury trine to Mars, it's being received there, but then it's also Mercury conjunct Saturn. What that does is that Mercury is under this condition that's called enclosed by the malefics. And last week, we've already talked about how Mercury has not been in a great situation with the North Node and the Neptune stuff, and then also being in Pisces, which is a sign that Mercury doesn't love too much. And last week, we had Mercury and Pisces lost in the sauce, just flooded, full of papers. We don't even know what's written in them. Nothing is reliable. We don't know where we are. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. I think today adds a little bit of a pressure to figure things out that doesn't really help with that. It's nice that there's that Mars reception, but I think that the Mars reception in this case is really kind of just getting us to move away from certain things or ignoring certain things altogether to make space and make things slightly more digestible, which is kind of hard now still with Mercury the way that it is. But knowing that Mercury is stationing, we know that whatever it is today that happens is something that will carry us forward in that retrograde journey. One of the things that we talked about with Mercury is that Mercury got up to some shady business in Aries and then had to return to Pisces to answer for their mistakes. But then I think that now is that moment where Mercury has got to do that. And this is why I have in the image Mercury still flooded, but Mercury has to go on a video call with Grandma Saturn, who's gonna give Mercury a little bit of a scolding. Mercury doesn't really get to move on. Things look a little still rough for Mercury, unfortunately. But after this scolding, Mercury can just move on. Things have been lost. Mercury's streak of triumph and luck maybe has come to an end. But soon we'll be back in Aries, which is really nice because Mercury will be insect in a fiery sign, like ready to just brush all this stuff off and move on to the next thing. I think a piece of that might be Mercury going back to find ways to do some of the radical and cool shit that Mercury was up to, but now with a bigger awareness of the law or what is allowed for Mercury to do. And it's for that reason that I gave today a 3 difficulty and a 2 utility. I think the difficulty is in having to listen to some really harsh but needed feedback, especially with that Mars reception, can be that Mercury really did fuck up, and now Mercury just has to answer for their mistakes. The utility, though, is in just taking it in. Know where you went wrong and try and do better next time. But yeah, some of the signs that should be paying attention to today are Aries, Gemini, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Moving on to Thursday, a short and sweet kind of day. It's April 10th, Jupiter's day, with Jupiter in Gemini, in detriment in his element, in Mars' decan in terms, and somewhat void. Alright, so a planet like Jupiter doesn't quite go void, of course. It's a very kind of like a rough thing to come across. But the way that I've been working with this is that whenever a planet in their own day doesn't make any aspects, to me that signals that maybe things are kind of like at a standstill. Or they're not really like moving. There's not a lot of commotion. There's not a lot to do. Which, for Jupiter and Gemini, I think is actually a great thing. Because as you remember, Jupiter has been dealing with everybody's fucking problems. So this can be one of those days where everybody shuts the fuck up. And Jupiter just gets to, close the door and move on. And this is what we have in the image for today. It's just Jupiter closing the door to his office and, I don't know, moving on to do whatever the fuck else Jupiter wants to do, other than solving people's problems. I think one of the good things about today is that we can really start to digest some of what just happened. Last week we had Jupiter get a lot of positive feedback and a lot of help from the luminaries. So maybe today Jupiter is just letting that sink. And that can be a good thing. And it's for those exact reasons that I gave today a 1 difficulty and a 1.5 utility. It's not difficult, it's not very useful. It's a good day to just do nothing, relax, maybe just do a lot of thinking, but not act on it necessarily. Just maybe have a nice, lazy day. We all deserve those sometimes, especially with everything that just happened. And some of the people that might really want that are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Right, moving on to our Friday, it is Venus's day, with Venus in Pisces, exalted in her element in Mars' decan in terms, separating from a Saturn conjunction while stationing direct. All right, this is an interesting day. We talked about how last week we just started this big of a bummy window for Venus. Being that close to Saturn kind of like sours things out for Venus. It's really good for Saturn, not so much as good for Venus. And so Venus is just kind of like really thinking about some of the difficult things that she's got to do now that she's made some of those decisions about this whole entire retrograde cycle. Venus is not stationing today necessarily. I think she's stationing tomorrow, but for all intents and purposes, Venus is at that degree already. And so in the image, I have a really simple and sweet sort of thing, because Venus is now separating from Saturn, even though it's just like a degree, and for all intents and purposes, they're really close together. But maybe today is a time where Venus gets to take a step back from what she just learned from Saturn last week and gets to come with her own conclusions as to what she must do. I think one of the things we talked about with the Venus retrograde is how she's been on this journey to find out, like, what are the new rules? What are the new regulations that I need to impose to have healthy relationships in my life? And I think maybe now Venus just knows what some of those are, and she's just not quite ready to communicate those just yet. Maybe when she goes back into Aries, things will get a little clearer. But for now, we're kind of just, feeling sad about it, and that's okay. But it's for those reasons that I gave today a 3.5 difficulty and a 2.5 utility. I think the difficulty is the reality of things. Maybe Saturn was a little bit more pessimistic than is warranted for Pisces, but Saturn had a point. Now, the utility of today is not too far from the difficulty, but I think the utility is in maybe just facing the reality of things and taking your time with it. There's no need to rush things. Venus is now stationary. She's not moving anywhere. And so maybe you shouldn't also save those big moves or those big decisions for later. It's fine. Not all problems need to be solved right now. And some of the signs that should pay attention to that are Taurus, Libra, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. All right, getting into our weekend, it is Saturn's day, Saturday, April 12th. Saturn is in Pisces, out of element, peregrine in Mars' decan in terms, conjunct Venus, who's stationing direct. All right, this is our full moon day. It's really nice. If you saw Venus's image, Saturn's image is not too different. They're so close to each other, it's hard to separate one from the next. It's kind of these 2 days like the same vibe, so there's not much to add here. What I did want to talk about, though, is how different things might be from Saturn's perspective. In many ways, having Venus struggle a bit can make Saturn struggle a lot more validated. Because if you think about it, Venus is exalted in Pisces. She's having the time of her life. If even she can struggle a little bit in that sign, It makes Saturn struggle not seem untouchable, and I think that is a little bit of the Venus reception that's happening with Saturn. And so I think today can be one of those days where, like very similar to what I said last week, is that Saturn really feels heard, and Saturn feels it's been provided for, and things are still a little shitty. Saturn is not in a place that it likes to be in. It's soon moving towards a sign where it struggles with at times. So knowing that all of that is in play, sometimes just having somebody who you can commiserate with and cry together can really be helpful. And I think that's what we have today. One thing that's also very interesting is that today is the full moon day that's happening in Libra, and both Venus and Saturn are rulers of Libra. Venus rules Libra, she's like the owner of the sign, but then Saturn is exalted there, bringing some of that exalted vibe to the sign. And so I think that this Venus-Saturn conjunction is directly speaking to some of the themes of this full moon. Like I said, this full moon is the first Libra full moon that is not an eclipse. It really brought a big story to a conclusion in some way. And I think that to think to the image and why Venus and Saturn are crying and embracing each other, it's because they have made it. They have made through that story. And maybe part of you is grieving it a little bit. I think that considering that this has been an eclipse story, things might have not concluded in the most triumphant light. But I think that nonetheless, there is good that can be found in just knowing that all that is behind you. Maybe we need a couple more days to cry it out. But, you know, you're here. And that's worth something. This is why I gave today a 2 difficulty and a 2.5 utility. I think the difficulty is in that sort of like wrap up. It's like the biggest wrap up. I've been alluding to this for so much time. And I feel like we're now sort of, not quite, but very close to it. And I think that the utility of today is in very much just crying it out. Feel sad. Be bummy about it. You're allowed to feel bad about the way things are right now. It's okay. With Venus in Pisces, you might understand that all of that was for a good reason, but you don't have to pretend like you feel good about it. You're totally allowed to just cry and be a little bitchy and a little sentimental and just eat tons and tons of ice cream to make yourself feel better. It's totally okay. I'm giving you the permission slip for that. But some of the signs that should really listen to that are Taurus, Libra, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Now, closing our week, it is the Sun's day, April 13th, with the Sun in Aries, exalted in his element in Venus's decan and Mars's terms, departing from a full moon and soon being received by a Mars square. So, if you remember last week, I talked about how the Sun and Jupiter were in this wagon and the Sun just came into this gold. And now this week we have the Sun carrying this little bag of gold around. But then little did they know, the river actually belongs to somebody. And they took somebody else's gold. Maybe the person that owned that space was also totally unaware of the fact that the gold was there. But now that they found out, they're very eager to have a conversation with the Sun, who's carrying this bag of gold. I'm like, why in my property? Why are you taking these things? What were you thinking? But despite all of that, the Sun is exalted in Aries, so the Sun does have a little bit of a claim to anything that's in that space. And the Sun is also very acquainted with Cancer, because Cancer and Leo are royal signs, where they're alike ingirding signs. And even though the Sun doesn't necessarily rule Cancer, the Sun and Moon rule Cancer and Leo together. So the Sun has a little bit of a claim to that space. And so the way that I was seeing this is that despite having a little bit of an argument, I think that maybe the Sun and Mars might come to an agreement as to how to distribute some of this newfound wealth. And I think that this can be a little bit of the vibe today. Maybe somebody is really upset that you're like encroaching on their territory a little bit, or you're doing something and you're outshining them or anything along those lines. But then maybe if you talk and get together, you're able to find a way that you can both mutually benefit from this situation in one way or another. I don't know how that's gonna go, but I hope you do. Yes, so it's for those reasons that I gave today a 2 difficulty and a 3 utility. I think the difficulty is in maybe being caught outshining or encroaching into somebody's space and having to deal with that. But the utility is that there is in fact a way in which you can both benefit from whatever just happened. You just have to maybe talk it out a bit, maybe yell it out a bit, but in the end, I think that things can be figured out, which is nice. But yes, guys, this has been the week. This week we settled out a 2 difficulty and a 2.5 utility on average, which is really nice. It's 2 weeks in a row where utility prevails. And so I think that very much post-eclipse, things are looking really good. Some of the best days of the week are, of course, Monday. I would really save all my stuff to that Monday because it looks really good. But maybe as we get to Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, things get a little less exciting. So I would just keep that in mind. I think despite the high utility for the week, or like the middling utility really, because it's like a 50% utility, I think despite that, the week still does have a bit of a heavy mood. There's things that can be done about those moods, but the vibe's still there in the air. So just keep that in mind. But yes, that is all for today. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.